Salvete omnes. This is chapter 38, exercise B. The instructions say for us to first identify the underlined English infinitive, then identify the usage of that infinitive, either complementary, objective, or subjective, and then to translate the English sentence into Latin. Starting with sententia prima, number 1, the first one. You ought to listen to me. So the infinitive is to listen to. So audio, audire, audivi, auditus. Remember that audio is a transitive verb. So audio being transitive means that it takes an accusative direct object. And though you might think listen to me, that would take a dative, if you remember that the to is part of the verb, then that may help you remember that audio is a transitive verb, so the accusative may. Now, what type of infinitive is it? Well, it's working off of you ought. In fact, it's completing the meaning of you ought. It's complementing the main verb you ought. So you ought to do something. When debeo, debere, debui, debitus, to owe takes an infinitive, it means to ought. It's like you owe it to listen to me. You ought to listen to me. So the infinitive usage is complementary, and altogether, audire me debes. Audire me debes. Sententia secunda. They will start to flee. So they will start to flee. Third person plural, future of incipio, incipere, incepi, inceptus. So incipio is a third IO, incipio. So the present stem is found by chopping the O off the first principal part, incipi, because we want the future tense. Remember those third IO, and fourth conjugations use the future am, es, et, amos, etis, ent endings. So incipient. So when we use incipio to begin to do something, it takes a complementary infinitive. So we want the present active infinitive of fugio, fugere, fugi, fugitus. So fugere incipient with an ENT. Tertia, sententia tertia. He has decided not to finish the wall. So our infinitive is to finish. He has decided not to finish. So he has decided. Well, when we have decide, constituo, constituere, constitui, constitutus, well, that takes a complementary infinitive. So the usage of the infinitive to finish is going to be complementary because it completes the meaning of decided. So decided, constituo, constituere, constitui, constitutus. We want the perfect tense, so third person singular, active indicative, constituit, constituit. And then we want not, to not do it, known, adverb. It's modifying to finish, which is going to be conficio, conficere, confeci, confectus. And we want the present active infinitive. Complementary. Conficere. The murus e masculine, the wall. We want the accusative direct object of this infinitive. So murum. Altogether, something like murum non conficere constituit. Quarta, sententia quarta. Caesar ordered the men to be led into camp. So he ordered the men. Caesar ordered eubeo, eubere, iussi, iussus, which takes a subject accusative when it's in the active voice, and then an objective infinitive. So the usage of this infinitive to be led is objective infinitive. So Caesar, nominative singular masculine subject, he ordered. Iussit, the third person singular perfect active indicative, iussit. The men, He ordered the men, wir, wiri, masculine, plural. It's the subject accusative. To be led. Now, to lead would be ducere, the present active infinitive of duco, ducere, duxi, ductus. But to be led, because it's a third conjugation, duco, ducere, you chop the ere off the second principal part, ducere, and you get duke, and then you add, that's right, the letter I. Of course you do, to get dookie. Of course it's dookie. And then into camp, in plus the accusative shows motion into. So we want the accusative of kasra, orum, always neuter, always plural. It only has 5 forms. Kasra, kasrorum, kasris, kasra, kasris. So the accusative would be kasra, in kasra. Altogether, something like Caesar, viros, in kasra duci iusit. And that would be an objective infinitive because of the subject accusative viros. Quinta, sententia quinta. Are you afraid to see him? Are you? So are you afraid to see him? So firstly, it's interrogative. Yes or no? Are you? So whatever our first word is will end in the enclitic ne, N-E. And typically, I like to put the verb first in these because ne attaches nicely to the end of verbs. So, are you afraid? So, to be afraid is timeo, timere, timui. Are you afraid? Second person singular. Present tense, because you're afraid right now. Times ne, times ne. Are you afraid? To see. So, to be afraid to do something completes the meaning of the verb to be afraid. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid to do? Complementary infinitive. Video, videre, vidi, visus. We want videre, the present active infinitive. Complementary. And then him is going to be the accusative direct object of is, ea, id in the masculine gender. So, timesne, eum videre. Optime, sexta, sententia sexta. They force the line of battle to depart. So they force, third person plural. They force the direct object, the line of battle, and in Latin that's just going to be one noun, acies, to do something. So they forced the subject accusative to do the objective infinitive. So kogo, kogere, koegi, coactus, it works like eubeo in the active voice, taking a subject accusative. So an accusative of acies, a feminine, a fifth declension, to depart, to discedo, discedere, discessi, discessus. Present active infinitive, discedere. So altogether something like discedere aciem coegerunt. The infinitive usage being objective infinitive, because there's a subject accusative with a verb like kogo. Eubeo does the same thing. Septima, sententia septima. Do you hesitate to come? So we're asking a question, interrogative, yes or no. So the first word will end in the enclitic ne to indicate the question, and verbs tend to go well in at the start of these because the ne attaches well to the end of them, like an alien parasite. What? So do you hesitate? Dubito, dubitare, dubitavi, dubitatus. Now, the root of that verb means to doubt, dubium, a doubt. But when this verb, dubito, takes a complementary infinitive, like this verb, complementary infinitive usage, then it means to hesitate. It's like you doubt yourself, so you stall, you hesitate to do the thing. So dubito, dubitare, dubitavi, dubitatus, second person singular. It's the present tense, do you right now, hesitate. Present active indicative, dubitasne. And then complementary infinitive, venia, venire, veni, ventus, venire. Dubitas ne venire? Venire ne dubitas? Octava, sententia octava. It ought to be placed here. It ought to be placed here. So it ought is like sententia prima, where we're using a form of debeo, debere, debui, debitus. So that takes a complementary infinitive, to be placed. This is the present passive infinitive of pono, ponere, posui, positus. So we have the very, very fun pony. So ponere would be the present active infinitive. And because it's a third conjugation, chop the entire ERE off to get pone, and then add an I. Pony. Here is just the adverb form of hic, only there's a macron over the letter I, so it's hic. It's a long I. Instead of hic, it's hic. Hic pony debet, it ought. Third person singular. It ought to be placed here. Hic pony debet. Complementary infinitive with a form of debeo. Nona, sententia nona. We shall begin to build a cap. Cool story. So we shall begin to build. So to begin, incipio, this is like sententia secunda. It takes a complementary infinitive. Infinitive usage complementary. We shall begin. Incipio, incipere, incepi, inceptus. We shall. So it's a third IO conjugation. To get the present stem, you chop the O off the first principal part, so incipi, and then add the future, not bobis bit, but es et, amos etis ent, and we is first person plural, so amos, incipiemus. We shall begin. To build, to munio, munire, munivi, munitus. So incipiemus munire, to build a direct object camp in the accusative. Casra, oram, always neuter, always plural. So munire casra incipiemus. Nunc et semper. And decima, sententia decima. He was preparing to sail. He was preparing, when you use paro, parare, paravi, paratus with a verb, it takes a complementary infinitive. So he was preparing. Third person singular imperfect active indicative, parabat, to navigo, navigare, navigavi, navigatus, to sail. Navigare, parabat. Optime, very well done.